Okay, why don't we get started? There's a bunch of folks who are here on time. I want to be respectful of that, and so let's kick things off. Welcome to today's VoiceOps webinar on bringing the behavior change cycle to life. We're thrilled that you've joined us today, and we hope that today's session is valuable for you. Before we get started and jump into the meat of things, I want to go over a few logistics with you. So first of all, I want to reassure you that we will be sending the recording of this to you and the slide deck after the webinar. So you don't have to worry about that, and you'll have that and you'll be able to share it with your colleagues as well. We are going to be taking questions throughout the session, but we're going to address them at the end to make sure that we get through all of the important information. So you can ask questions via the chat window, and I'll be fielding them and we'll address them at the end. And finally, we request that you stay muted to avoid background noise getting in the way of everyone's experience. And if anyone has any technical difficulties, please feel free to put that into the chat window and I'll be monitoring that. But, honestly, you're not here to listen to me. You're here to listen to Ethan, our CEO at VoiceOps, and he's going to talk to you about the behavior change cycle. Why is it important? He's going to go through in detail the elements of the behavior change cycle for you, and then talk to you about how you can implement it with your team and how VoiceOps may be helpful for you in that process. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Ethan.
All right, thanks, Sherry. Can you hear me? I'm not muted, right? Okay, cool. Hey everyone, I'm Ethan. I'm the founder and CEO of VoiceOps, and I'm really glad to be here. Thanks so much for coming, and let's just get into it. So, as Sherry said, this is all about the behavior change cycle, and so what we'll start, and I'm going to talk for the next 20 minutes or so, and where we'll start is sort of why it matters. And so we're going to zoom out on kind of a macro level and talk about what's going on with customers and call centers these days. Then we'll talk about what is the behavior change cycle, how do you implement it at, with your team, with or without VoiceOps. But then we will talk about what VoiceOps does and how it can help facilitate the use of the behavior change cycle. And we'll take questions, and that'll be it. So let's dig in. All right. So why does the behavior change cycle matter? And so I'm going to zoom out at a macro level here and talk about what's happening with customers, which is that, this is certainly something our customers are seeing, and I imagine many of the folks on this call are experiencing it too. Customer conversations are getting more complex. It's happening for a number of reasons. Partially it's the internet, where customers are getting smarter and they have more choices. A lot of these markets are getting more competitive. And so what you end up seeing is that customers are demanding a more consultative experience. And many of our customers, the way they put it to me often is, that one of the ways they think about differentiation, as the market gets more competitive, it's not so much about what you're selling, although that's important, but it's just as much about how you're selling. Are you building trust with that customer? Are you being consultative? Are you helping them find the right solution? Because the reality is they could go a bunch of different places, and so you really got to create this incredible experience on the phone. And there's been all this hype in the last 5 years or so about chatbots and artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've all heard the buzzwords. Those things are cool. They're useful, and to some extent. But what we believe, what we're seeing in the market, what VoiceOps is built on is a belief that high quality human connection is still critical for most sales and collection cycles, as critical as it was back in the days of bartering, when we were on the streets talking with each other. It still really matters because it's how you differentiate. And so, and by the way, the data bears this out. You guys probably just see it anecdotally, but here's a couple of great data points. 84% of customers say that being treated like a person, not a number, is key to winning their business. 67% of customers say their standards for a good experience is higher than it's ever been, right? So people want to be treated like a human. Their questions are getting more complex, which means the demands on us, on the call centers, are higher to have better conversations. And this is what we call the true conversation economy. So there's this whole big part of the economy where transactions are founded around great human connection and great human relationship. So we're a technology company, we believe in technology, but all towards it's all in service of how do you facilitate these incredible connections between your business and your customers that's going to give you great results and help you advance your mission. So that's kind of the backdrop. And, what we find, and it's probably no surprise to folks who are working in call centers, is that call center teams are not as effective as they could or should be. And that's because having really good conversations is also really hard. There's this great quote at the bottom here by the playwright George Bernard Shaw: "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." So hopefully I'm communicating well in this webinar, but communication is hard. And, probably you have good intuition about this, that your conversations are, there's something to be desired in the quality of those conversations. There are missed opportunities being left on the table. You might even have data showing that your top reps are doing way better than your bottom reps. And it's clear that there's a big gap in the variance of the conversation quality that's happening on the floor. Here's another data point, this graph on the right, which I think is just a really good illustration of what's going on. This is showing the perception gap between customers and reps. So the blue is showing how reps think they're doing on the phone. And then the orange is showing how customers perceive the reps on the phone. So for example, most reps think they're listening to their prospects' needs. And then it turns out that customers don't really think reps are listening to their needs. And you can see this across the board. So there's all this good evidence that there's some disconnect here in the quality of conversation, the quality of human connection that's going to be important for your business. That means money left on the table. It also means, I know certainly us at VoiceOps, we're very mission driven. Many of you guys are probably very, a lot of our customers are very mission driven about what they're working on. So it's not just money on the table, but it's your mission too. These are missed opportunities to advance brand loyalty and get more folks rallied around the thing you're trying to achieve. We also see this, by the way, not just in, in some of this data about rep performance, but also we find that managers are typically a little bit optimistic about how well these conversations are going. And so we did this very fun survey where we actually went to our customers and we went to a bunch of managers and said, tell us for the key behaviors that you think are important to have happen on calls to generate great conversations. Tell us how often you think those things are actually happening on the calls when they should be. And then we went, so we got all those responses. Then we went into the calls. We're talking hundreds of thousands of calls, and we actually measured this stuff to figure out whether they were right. And the blue on this graph shows the guess of the manager. So you can see managers on average guess that deep discovery, sort of a consultative discovery process, is happening about 50% of the time. The truth is it's more like 20%. And this happens just consistently. There's this big gap. This is the perception gap between coaches and reps. And you might be saying to yourself, because I hear this all the time, it's like, oh, no, we're very pragmatic. We know these things are not happening as much as we want. Well, it's good you're pragmatic. You might even still be overestimating. So it's just a thing that we see over and over again. So just to kind of summarize, and we're going to get to the behavior change cycle now, just to summarize the why of behavior change, customer conversations are getting more complex and they're as important as ever. And yet doing this is really hard. There's all these data points that show that there's a disconnect between reps and customers, which means leaving money on the table, leaving your missions on the table. And the question is, how do we fix that? And so we believe that it all starts with coaching. And just like the connection, the human connection between the customer and the rep's really important, just as important is the connection between the coach and the rep. When you have a really strong, trust-oriented coaching relationship, great coaching can lead to great reps. Great reps can lead to very happy customers, right? So we believe that the coaching workflow is critical to having great, high-quality, human-connected conversations. And that's why we think a lot, we obsess over the behavior change cycle. So let's get to it. So what is the behavior change cycle? Let me set the stage and then we'll go through the 5 steps here. So it's all about driving quick and meaningful increases in adherence to your sales process. And when I say sales process, maybe you call it a behavior methodology or your call flow. It's really, for the things that that comprise a great conversation, how do we get your reps to do those things more often so that your customers and reps are having more and more great conversations? And if I kind of sum up our sort of philosophy of the world, like, I think you can think of the conventional coaching method as call-based coaching, versus we are thinking about behavior-based coaching. So call-based coaching is where you might audit one call, maybe you're live listening or it's a QA after the fact, and you listen to that call and then you coach them on 7 different things that happened in that call and how to improve on those 7 things. So you're coaching on many behaviors across one call-based coaching. Whereas behavior-based coaching is coaching across many calls on just 1 or 2 behaviors. And the reason that this is important is because we believe, and we see it in the data, that if you stay focused on a couple of behaviors that someone's struggling with, and you really follow through and you coach them a bunch and see if they're improving, keep working with them, that's how you get the lasting, meaningful behavior change that's going to give you consistent, great conversations with your customers. This sort of call-based where you listen to one call and you coach on a bunch of things, you end up not really seeing the movement that you need to see to really step change your performance. So that's how to think about it. A couple of other notes here is that we developed this in conjunction with our customers. And it's really been a 3-year process to do so. And many of our customers end up seeing that their behaviors, double. Adherence to their behaviors, the behaviors that comprise a great conversation, double over the course of 30 or 60 days. We've seen up to 10x, which is pretty insane. I'm not guaranteeing that, but the results you can get from this are pretty incredible. It's a simple model with some pretty great results. And you can do this without VoiceOps. You can do it better with VoiceOps, so we'll talk about that. But this is the kind of thing you can take to your team tomorrow and start implementing. And I think even if you don't have quite the most sophisticated tools, even just starting with a pen and paper, you're going to get something out of it that's going to be valuable. Okay, so let's dive in. So there are 5 steps here, and the first step is about identifying the key behaviors that you believe comprise a great conversation. Right? My guess is that many of you already have a good idea of what these things are. A lot of the folks we work with have spent actually a ton of time, years, building out their call flows and the behaviors that they believe are critical to having great connections with customers and closing business. If you don't have those in mind, and by the way, I recommend picking 4 or 5 kind of key behaviors. Maybe it's consultative discovery, tying value back to what you learned in discovery. Maybe it's the close attempt, scheduling the follow-up, overcoming the objections, figuring out why they're delinquent on their payment. There's a whole bunch of behaviors, but they're going to be specific to your business. So those are just some examples. If you don't know what they are, one way you can think about it is, what are the outcomes of our business that we want to achieve? Maybe this year we're really focused on getting close rates up. Okay, what are the behaviors that are going to drive up close rates? Probably great discovery, consultative discovery, and close attempts. Maybe compliance is the big thing for the organization, and then you're thinking more about, not overpromising, recorded line disclosures, do not call lists, things like that. So it really depends on what your business goals are. But once you've identified those key behaviors, now you got to measure adherence to those behaviors across the floor. And importantly, and the reason you want to measure is so that you can hold your, a couple of reasons. 1, so you can figure out what you want to coach on. And 2, so that when you do coach, you can hold your reps accountable because you got good data to say, hey, this thing's getting better or not. So you want to understand across the floor for each rep, how often are they actually adhering to these behaviors? Now, one thing I'll say is the data's got to be reliable. It's got to be super accurate, because we've probably all had the experience where you go into a room with a rep and you say, hey, you're really struggling on discovery because I listened to this one call and I noticed you struggle with discovery. And then the rep says, well, no, I didn't do discovery on that call for this reason, but I did it on all the other calls that you didn't listen to. And then you just have this disconnect, not between the rep and the customer, but between the coach and the rep, that breaks down trust, and then you don't get the behavior change. So having great data is important to have an objective conversation that the rep really believes in. Okay, that's enough on that. So step number 3, once you've got the measurements, then you want to set improvement targets. And typically you want to pick 1 or 2 behaviors for each rep to work on at a time. And importantly, these goals should be very concrete. So for example, it might look like over the next 30 days, I want to increase, Bobby's adherence to discovery, meaning the percent of calls where he should have done discovery, how many of them did he actually do it? I want to increase his adherence by 10 percentage points, from 20% to 30% of his calls. That's a great goal, right? And it's achievable. So you want it to be achievable and super measurable. Once you set that target, now you're off to the races and it's time to go coach. And so this is where you want to go find, ideally, and with VoiceOps, we can help you do this. It's a little harder without VoiceOps, but you can still try. You want to go find a bunch of calls where there are coaching opportunities around this behavior. Ideally, you're doing this daily, which I know is a bit radical because as managers at call centers, life is hectic. Like things are coming, inbound all the time. You never have enough time to coach your reps. The idea of coaching every rep daily on behaviors sounds pretty intimidating. We can help you do it with VoiceOps, but it's a really good goal even without VoiceOps, because it's that consistency, coaching someone every day on that behavior that they need work on. That's what's going to drive the behavior change. So you coach on the behavior and then go back to the data. And this is number 5 here. You want to track progress towards the goal. Is Bobby getting better at discovery or not? And if not, let's keep going and do this thing again until we feel happy with it, and then we can move on to the next behavior. So that's the behavior change cycle in a nutshell. And if you do this, if you keep going in this, in this circle, what you're going to see is, I guarantee it, because we see it every time with customers, you're going to see behaviors go up, and you're going to see those behavior changes sustain, and you're going to see your top line get better. Right? So it's really powerful if you just follow these simple 5 steps. Okay. So now let's talk about, like I said, you can do this without VoiceOps, and whether or not you want to get involved with us, I hope you will. You should try this, and I think you'll like what you find, and maybe that will be reason enough to then come talk to us later. But let's talk a little bit about how VoiceOps fits in here. We are the coaching enablement platform to give teams a way to implement this cycle quickly and effectively. So we're the only platform in the world that's built around the behavior change cycle. The whole thing is about this. So if you're not a company that's bought in on behavior change, probably don't want to use VoiceOps, because it's all about behavior change. And the idea is that with VoiceOps, you can get through the whole cycle in 90 seconds. Pick your behavior, find a bunch of coaching examples, go back to the data. That should be a 90-second workflow. Now that sounds like a bold claim, because in a call center, you're typically spending 30 minutes listening to the call, then you got to go track down the rep, and then you got to go listen to another call to see if it's getting better. So I will show you how that works, but you can do it in 90 seconds in VoiceOps. And the speed and reliability of that just means that you can drive behavior change a lot quicker and without adding a bunch more resources to your team, which is important. So that's what we do. And the rest of this, I'm just going to take you through the behavior change cycle again, but I'm going to do it in the VoiceOps platform here. I'll show you screenshots so you can see how it actually works in practice. Okay, so by the way, in this top right-hand corner, you can see the behavior change cycle, and it's highlighted for the part of the cycle that corresponds to the screenshot in the platform. So what we're looking at here is the the first 3 steps, which is pick your behaviors, measure them super well, and then set targets, that all happens in VoiceOps in the focus behaviors page. So let me tell you a bit about what you're looking at. What you're looking at is for a sample collections company, you can see for the behaviors that are part of their call flow. So these are specific to that company. So it's important that the data is specific to your actual call flow. So you can see assuming the payment, reason for delinquency, a benefit statement, payment timeline discovery. These are very specific to collections. And you can see for each of these behaviors, basically a scorecard of how often is each team adhering to those behaviors. Now, if you're a manager, you can get the same view, but for your reps. So you can see how often is each rep adhering to each of the behaviors. So it just depends who you are in the organization. And what this data is showing is it's not, the way to read this is, if you look at Team Roberto, his team is adhering, is doing assume the payment, like an assumptive close, basically, on 71%, not of all calls, but of the calls where that thing should have happened. So it's actually looking at the context of each call and saying, should it have happened? And then did it happen? And a couple of other things to point out, you can see that across these behaviors and across the teams, there's big differences between how well certain teams are doing it and how well other teams are doing it. Roberto's doing it 71% of the time, but you've got teams like Team Alex, only 19% adherence. So just like how we see gaps in the, in actual revenue performance between reps, you see the exact same thing on behavior adherence. And what else do I want to say about this? And so the importance of having this data is that once you have data like this, you can figure out where are your reps struggling and what should you focus the behavior change cycle on, what behavior, and then you can hold the reps accountable to it. Now, importantly, this data's got to be super accurate, because again, if the data is not accurate, managers aren't going to trust it, reps aren't going to trust it, and then you've got this VoiceOps platform, but you're still back listening to calls because you don't trust the data. And if you've used call analytics tools in the past, and I imagine many of you have, you've probably had the experience of, number one, the company claiming to have really accurate data, and number two, finding out that claim turns out not to be true. And maybe you've even had the experience of playing this kind of whack-a-mole game where you're keyword matching, you're trying to capture the stuff in the calls that you want, you're trying to combine these phrases, and it just feels like whack-a-mole. You can never quite get it right. There's always a problem. It's super time-consuming, and then your team just gives up. And so I understand that you've probably heard claims about data accuracy quite often, if you're familiar at all with this sort of general space. Ultimately, for any of these platforms, the proof is in the pudding. Same with VoiceOps. But our data is really incredibly accurate, and I want to tell you just a quick sidebar on how, because that gives just a little bit of credence to the claim. But we really believe in data quality. This is the thing I've been obsessing over since I started the company. It's the most important thing in VoiceOps, and we do a lot of work to make it really accurate. So how do we do this? The first is we have a behaviors consultant on staff who's going to work with your team to understand the set of behaviors that you believe make a great conversation. This person is going to work with you to understand what are those behaviors and when should they happen? What's the context of the call? And then what we do, once we become experts like you guys in your methodology, we then have our own internal human team that's actually going to go through hundreds of your conversations and label and actually look for those behaviors and actually label them in your calls. Because these conversations are very nuanced. So you really need a human to go through and understand what's happening. And then we take that data and we feed it into a machine learning model. And the machine learning model learns to recognize these patterns as accurately as a human can. It's a pretty radical approach for this space. We're the only company doing it. Everyone else doing this keyword thing that doesn't work, super frustrating. And what you're going to find is we're able to measure the things you care about in your calls, and we're able to do it at about a 95% accuracy rate. And when you have that level of data reliability, again, it means that all of a sudden you don't have to listen to calls, or not nearly as often. And you can trust the data, your reps trust the data, you get much better relationships in the company, at least better conversations. Let me read this quote and then we'll go to the next slide. Oh, yeah, okay, I have two more things to say. Here's the quote. Before VoiceOps, it was so time consuming to figure out what went wrong. There are so many metrics, time of call, talk time, conversion. You had to hunt and peck to find behaviors and listen to calls manually until you found a mistake. The last thing I'll say here is, because we're gonna go through this flow, let's imagine, I know we're coming up on time, so I'll go quickly. Imagine that we're coaching Team Alex here. And you can see Team Alex is doing great on reason for delinquency and payment timeline, but not so well on benefit statement. So now we can say, all right, we want to work with Team Alex on the benefit statement. So that's what we're going to do. So once you know what you want to work with someone on, now in VoiceOps, you can jump right to those coaching opportunities in the platform. Because we'll just say, hey, here are the calls where the thing happened, and you can do positive reinforcement coaching. Or here are the calls where it should have happened but didn't, and you can do missed opportunity coaching. And you can see it right here where it says this red X, the benefit statement did not happen. Okay, well, we're trying to improve the adherence to the benefit statement for Team Alex. So now we're going to look at the transcript, which, by the way, is very clean transcript, it's very accurate, and that's what you get. And we can actually do some coaching. So here you can leave a comment in the platform, and you can tag your rep. And you look at this comment, great job securing the payment, just make sure we're providing the benefit statement. So we very quickly picked the behavior we want to work on. We found an example where it should have happened but didn't, and we coached. That's a 90-second workflow in VoiceOps. And now the rep will get that feedback, and they can come into the platform in between phone calls or at the end of the day or whatever, and actually see the feedback tied to their call. And they can respond, and you get these really nice asynchronous discussions going. Now, that's not to replace one-on-ones or in-person coaching, but remember, we're trying to get daily coaching going. So this can supplement the other stuff that you're doing. It's just that it's very quick. And so you can really get a lot of coaching done. Now, if we were in the platform or had more time, I'd take you through the workflow where you could actually go through 5 or 10 calls in 5 minutes. And now you can coach on this benefit thing on 5 or 10 calls very quickly. Maybe that's an hour or 2 hours of audio you would have had to otherwise listen to. And that's where you start to really drill this thing into the head of the rep and see that behavior change that's going to create the great human connection and create great customer relationships. All right, so that's step 4 of the behavior change cycle. And the final step is track progress, right? So you want to then, after you've done the coaching, you want to go back the next day and see, okay, did my rep take my feedback and actually improve? And if they did, maybe we're good to go and move on to the next behavior. Otherwise, we go through the cycle again. And again, with really good data, you can actually trust these trends and hold folks accountable. And so that's it. But it's very simple. By going through this process again and again, the behavior change cycle, I think what you're going to see is some incredible results where all of a sudden folks are doing the things that you need them to do in these conversations to have great connections with customers, and you're going to see it show up in the performance of your business. So thank you so much. Happy to stick around for some questions, and hope that we'll get to chat with you guys more and ultimately even partner with some of you. Thanks.
Thanks, Ethan. So if anyone has any questions for Ethan about VoiceOps or the behavior change cycle, feel free to stick them in the chat window and we'll address them. And if not, that's okay. Spend some time with the information you just heard. You can reach us via our website at voiceops.com. And as I mentioned, we'll be sending this slide deck and the recording out to you after this, so you'll be able to access it after the fact on demand as well. But we'll stay on for a couple more minutes in case any questions occur to you. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you again on a future VoiceOps webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, we're gonna hop off and end things. Thanks again for everyone who joined us, and stay tuned for the recording and information about future VoiceOps webinars. Hope to see you again soon. Bye.